Monster. You know, I mean, it's interesting that, you know, not Johan, Tenma actually says monster in English, right? Yeah, right. Good luck stopping that boy. That kind of sounded like Gone. Ah? Someone's going after Schubert. Just chop off that hair and it's the same person. It'd be cool to have an actual physical copy of that book, if that's even a thing. I'm sure there's a fan-made thing of it out there. Etsy, maybe? I love this cut of animation so much. Look at this. And the soundscape, again. Oh my god, the picture book. Okay then. Right? This I've seen or heard recently, translated. And then split into two. Oh, I love the presentation of this. The frame rate. Yeah. Oh, wow. The size difference there. Deal with the devil. Oh god, yeah, that always looks so strange. The entrance through the mouth. Otto the blacksmith, eh? For a time. I've heard that before. That's so cute. So is the voice, Nina's voice. Consumed him from the inside out. You know, I do kind of pity the monster, of course, in a sense. I shouldn't be smiling, but it's so cute. Reluctantly though, right? You see there is this sadness there. It's just in its nature. It can only resist it for so long. Oh, this is new. Ooh. Sick boy, you say? And what's the boy's name? I think I know the boy's name. This is beautiful stuff, man. Did he now? Interesting. Fighting against its nature. But for how long? But this time as the boy. He maintained the form. This boy's name, it's gotta be Johan, right? Surely. That's too cute. No one knows of the existence of the boy. Possibly the representation of Nina or Johan's dual nature. Is it? Yeah? Yeah? That really could be a representation of Nina then. Jewel. Oh. Like the wolf, like Schubert, kind of. Full look at the cover. Oh, that's how you do a title card. Beautiful stuff. That was brilliant. Apparently so. Well, yeah. But she doesn't seem too sure about anything. Okay, hold on, Lotte. Back up a bit. Okay, now she's being rude. She barely knows her. I mean, they know each other, but not that much. Okay, back up. The Red Hindenburg.
この本を読んでから最近あったいろんな変なことがまるで一つの塊みたいになんで私にのしかかってくるわけ？何から何までヨハンに結びついちゃうような気がするの。なんでよ。
But also kind of rude at the moment. Oh, okay. Okay.
その彼、その本を見てそっとした彼は
Yeah.
そんなに私に似てるの。双子みたいに。 私と双子みたいにそっくりなのね。あなたの友達のヨハンは。
Johan. Wow, man.
彼は今どこに？大学図書館で蔵
書寄贈
のセレモニーに。
Oh shit. It's all happening, folks. It's all happening. The ants, if you will. Go on, give me a focus pull. Close enough. Yeah, I need to hear Schubert's thoughts, maybe even inner monologue at this moment. This is it, Tenma. I know it's not going to happen. I'm so sure of it. But it's still compelling to see it. I mean, it's the midpoint, right? Officially the midpoint as well, I think. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Those hands are not made for killing. There's no surgical okay. Surgical precision there. In that situation. Junkers. There is surgical precision there, though. Oh. Maura? Ugh. Okay, something has to happen here. To escalate. If it wasn't difficult before, there it is. Roberto. It's gotta be. Big ogre. Oh, he broke his nose. Oh, God. So he's gotta be pointing it at Schubert, right? I'm still thinking about the first half, man. A nameless monster, the picture book. Man, it's quite the introduction. I got it twice. Tenma, you might need to move those hands now. No. Gasoline? Hey! Holy shit, that's the lady! And the grand old fire, is it? It's the lady! Holy shit, man. From Reichwein. The Session. The fake, wife of Hesse. A third time. Interesting. No. Just to make it clear, I'm not saying the guy's actually doing it a third time. They're giving me 3 different perspectives of it. So, Schubert, or Roberto's been told to shoot Schubert, I believe, and then you've got the fake wife, whoever that is, to start the fire. That's not that big of a shocker, but to see her walk in. It's a full house. Yeah. They made that clear in the last episode, and actually the last couple of episodes. A lot of ants. A lot of ants. A lot of unique looking ants at that. Oh. Did he not realize how many people there might be here? Oof. God damn, you might have a broken jaw after that. But again, it's story logic. Oh, wow. He's gonna say something or tell them. Johan basically told him as much just now. The chaos this is about to cause is inevitable. Holy shit. He's about to give a signal. Make a single file, like an ant. Or like the ants. Oh. Ooh. Oh my god, that looks beautiful. Almost 3D. This is beautifully dark. Yeah, she's cut from the same cloth. Whoever the hell she is. And now within this chaos, Roberto is meant to shoot Schubert. Oh. Oh. Johan didn't tell him. Yeah, Johan's had a bit of a change of heart recently. Man, great voice acting, but it's rare to get this out of Roberto. This time, but I still can't see someone like Roberto dying either. Holy shit. Yeah, the bigger monsters. Describing the chaos. I think he can. From a few different angles, actually. Okay, he might shoot Roberto, but Roberto might not die. That could be a good trade-off. But are you allowed to take Tenma's life, though? But again, he does things himself sometimes. That's a great episode, man. Important episode. You could tell it's a significant episode. Again, midpoint of the series. Wow. Okay, let's get into it, folks. Episode 37 of Monster, officially the mid-series finale. I mean, maybe not a finale. I'm so used to saying something like that, but I mean, it certainly had elements that really made it feel like I said, quite a significant episode, important episode. I mean, it's as important as it gets, really. It's right up there. You could easily call it the best episode of the series. At this point, it's a strong contender and then some. It really could be the best, and I'm sure for many of you it might actually be the best episode up until this point, at least. I've still got quite a bit to get through, 37 episodes to be exact. So I'm sure there's many more episodes of this ilk ahead of me. But yeah, here at the midpoint, it's a worthy midpoint episode, right? And, as reflected in the production side of things, it really truly does have that big episode feeling to it, doesn't it? And I think, I mean, it's certainly a tale of two halves, that's for sure. I mean, tonally, the first half and the second half, it's quite the departure. It's quite the shift, isn't it? But, each half is compelling and exciting and intriguing in its own right. I mean, the second half is more so of a thriller, right? Kind of reaching a peak. It's building and it crescendos into that cliffhanger. It's really quite exciting. It's not really the type of thing that happens all that often in this anime, in this story, right? Just the bombastic nature of the second half of this episode, it's absolute chaos, again, as expected and as desired as well, essentially, by Johan. People running for their lives, just kind of trampling over each other to, get to safety. And yeah, sure, human nature, it's certainly on display. And, Johan is certainly making sure that Schubert hears all about it. He's trying his best, and I think he does a really good job, a damn good job at describing the chaos and the fear, the palpable fear, right? I mean, he straight up asked him, do you feel it? Do you sense it? The fear, right? And I think, just through, I think I could see that fear on display, again, through the visual elements of the production side of things. And again, the score is really rather fitting as well, it really had that thriller tone to it as well. And then again, the final face-off, you've got Roberto and you've got Dr. Tenma. It essentially ends on quite a cliffhanger. I mean, it's a cliffhanger technically, but it's not the type of cliffhanger that really truly has me thinking, oh my God, is Tenma dead? Is it possible that he could be dead? Or is he badly injured? Oh, is Roberto dead? Listen, I'll be honest, and like I said, I actually don't even expect Roberto to die at this point. It's still a tad bit too early in the series, given, the function he serves, right? And the things that he facilitates as well for Johan. Though, of course, as he finds out, Johan doesn't always need to have him in on everything, right? He doesn't need to tell him everything. He doesn't need to specify everything. And, the thing is, Roberto tends to do things himself as well sometimes, or from time to time. Hell, at this point, it really looked like he's actually open to executing Tenma. Unless, of course, he has no intention of shooting Tenma. I don't know, man. He's a loose cannon as well. And, one thing I said during the episode, and it applies to, this lady as well. I said, they're all cut from the same cloth. Johan certainly knows how to attract these people. He certainly knows how to pick them out of a crowd. He certainly knows how to push their buttons. He knows how to harness them, essentially, right? That's been an ongoing theme since day one, of this anime, of this story. So yeah, this lady, I mean, she seems just as unhinged. I mean, hell, she actually seems even more unhinged than someone like Roberto, right? Just maybe a tad bit more. And yeah, she's the one that was pretending to be Hese's wife. And of course, Hese being Roberto. So the whole thing was just a setup from the beginning. But, going back to this cliffhanger and my expectations, there's one shot. There's one distinct shot. Now, the shot itself, I'm not an expert. I'm not sure if I can really distinguish between a sniper. Maybe I can actually. Sniper, yeah, a sniper does sound a bit different. It does. If I'm going to make an educated guess, I'll go ahead and say that's Tenma's gun going off, right? You see, throughout that second half of the episode, he really struggles to pull that trigger. Now, of course, for many of us, it's not a shocker. It's not a surprise that he didn't kill Johan. But, if you look at it from Tenma's perspective, if you try to put yourself into his shoes, he's trying. He's absolutely trying to, just muster up that resolve, right, to actually pull the trigger. But at the end of the day, it's just not in him. But again, that being said, now that he finds Roberto at the other end of it, right, of his gun, it appears that maybe he did finally, pull the trigger. He was able to finally kind of, allow himself to pull that trigger. From Tenma's perspective, it's if I don't do this, I might be dead. He might execute me right here. But again, there's always that notion of, okay, is he truly allowed to shoot Tenma? Really true. Maybe you could shoot Tenma in the leg, someone like Roberto might be open to doing something like that, actually put him in a lot of pain, right? But not kill him, right? Though, listen, man, even if you get shot in the leg, blood loss and all of that, it's a risky move. But, again, I've seen before that Roberto kind of, sometimes deviates from his directives, I suppose. I've seen it maybe at least once. But yeah, like I said, it feels like it's maybe a tad bit too early for someone like Roberto to die. That's just the nature of it, right? The big players, people like Johan, who has a sniper pointed at him by Tenma, and then Tenma, who's in danger as well. It's just too early. That's just the nature of the beast at this point. Essentially, it's too early in the story, in the anime, for any of these major players to die, right? And then Roberto, say Tenma actually pulled the trigger. He did pull the trigger. Say he actually landed a kill shot. Is that actually about to be Tenma's kill, right? Is he about to actually kill someone right then and there? That's another angle to this, isn't it? And, like I said, it's story logic, but, the beating that Tenma took from Roberto, he should have a broken jaw. He should have a broken nose. At this point, Tenma must have quite the concussion, right? He should be really heavily concussed. But again, it's story logic. If all of that actually does happen, it puts Tenma out of commission for quite a bit of time, right? So yeah, it's one of those things you just kind of have to overlook. You've got someone like Roberto. He's like this hulking figure. I called him this ogre. Just smashing Tenma's head in with the sniper rifle. At the end of the day, he really should have a fractured skull as well, And, they took a tumble from the top of the bookcase as well. So, all kinds of injuries should be at play here. But, again, you have to overlook some of these things. So, my final take on that is that, okay, I think maybe, yes, Tenma did pull the trigger. He was able to pull the trigger, finally. And I think he probably did hit Roberto. He probably does end up hitting Roberto, but I don't think it's going to be a kill shot. But it might be enough to actually put him out of commission for the time being, at least, right? Kind of take him out of the equation. So that could be quite beneficial for Tenma given the situation, right? It's a race against time. It really truly is, because that place is just about to go down. It's just moments from actually just taking on everyone that's trapped in there. The doors are locked. So, at this point, you do have to begin to think about, the amount of people that might actually die in here and that might not be able to get out. But then again, there's that notion of the players that are not here yet, but players that are meant to be here soon enough, right? People like Lunge, people like Reichwein and, Dieter, who's chasing him down as well. You've got people like Lotte and Nina as well. all roads lead to the library. So I can see that possibility, that they might actually make it here in time and actually help people get out of here, actually open up the doors somehow and, let everyone just rush out. Because it's mass panic, it's just absolute chaos in there. And of course, Johann just thrives, within that chaos, doesn't he? This is essentially Kinderheim 511 all over again. This is essentially the castle and all the people within that castle all over again, from the first half of the episode. That incredible first half, a nameless monster, the picture book brought to life in brilliant fashion as well, I'd say. It's that whole segment, right? The telling of the book by Nina, and it's a really specific take on the book as well, or rather a really specific approach to the narration by the voice actor for Nina, right? It's really monotone. It's really quite a matter of fact, the whole time, the tone does not change. And of course, I'll get into all of that. There's a lot of really intriguing stuff to dig into here. And, some really bizarre and fascinating things at play as well, in terms of certain things being confirmed. This episode right here, the context it's able to provide, it changes the trajectory of this story, I think. And the whole segment of the nameless monster, the picture book brought to life, and the story being told in its entirety, or at least up until that point. Yeah, I don't know, man. It kind of reframes everything I've known about Johann. It's rather bizarre, actually. It's quite jarring, even. Because I've actually seen Johann's trajectory just play out over the span of, the retelling of that book, of the picture book, A Nameless Monster, right? It's bizarre, man. That's really, really bizarre because now, looking through that lens, it just, provides a totally different type of context to everything I've seen, everything that Johann has put into motion. Now, listen, not all of it is brand new. I've been getting a drip feed of it through the endings, right? Since essentially day one, I suppose. And to be fair, I think I've done a decent job of analyzing those endings, throughout the span of these 37 episodes and, connecting, the story that's being told in those endings to Johann and Nina, because it just makes sense. If you look at it, if you actually take it in, it just, it's kind of hard to miss, the story that's being told there. But now, it's more so than just a story that's meant to be, retelling, the trajectory of Nina and Johann. The book itself actually is a bit of a Bible, bit of a guidebook, bit of a roadmap as far as Johann's entire life up until this point is concerned, or his life from a certain point on, right? Because it's also made clear, I suppose, since episode 33, that's around the time he comes across the book, right, at the library and has his episode and all of that. Calling it an episode is quite the understatement. But yeah, since that episode, there's always been speculation on my end about, okay, this book, it must have come into his life in his formative years. And, since then it's been suppressed by his mind, by his psyche, yet it's clear that it's been imprinted onto his psyche as well from that age, from his formative years, right? But seeing it, again, I suppose, at this age, after such a long time, and again, the whole idea of it bamboozling him, yeah, there's a few possibilities there, right? The reason for his actual reaction to that, coming across the prince specifically, perhaps, named Johann, right? Seeing that image or a collection of all of those images, it clearly just, opened Pandora's box once again for him, right? And again, I saw the reaction, right? Not quite the same reaction I got out of Nina. Now, if I go back to Johann's panic-induced episode from episode 33, yeah, now, you kind of have to begin to look at the reasoning, the possibilities, right? Up until this point, I just thought, okay, it's this book. And again, the characters from the book, I suppose, the monster itself and all of that, that mean quite a bit to Johann. Or that, he remembers this book from, again, his formative years, but, maybe clearly not a nice time of his life, right? And I'll get into that as well in terms of how, Johan and Nina handled this, and how, Nina is essentially being represented by the other monster, the one that is content with not having a name, that is content in its own skin at that point. But then again, on the flip side, you've got Johan, who seems to have a completely different relationship with this picture book, right? So, there's this notion, this possibility, and I believe, it really kind of feels like at some point, and I'm speaking of them before they actually show up at the border, right? Before they show up in Germany, and then, their story goes on from that point. I'm speaking of before, right? And I'm speaking of, their time in Czech Republic, former Czechoslovakia. There's a lot of stuff that's still untold. There's 37 episodes left, and I'm sure I'll get to learn about that aspect of their life as well, that time of their lives as well. And I think, even then, much like how, it kind of deviates a little bit, he ends up going to Kinderheim 511 in Germany. And then, of course, Nina ends up going to the other orphanage, the one that's all about, treating these children, these orphans, with love. All you really need is love. Even before they arrive in Germany, there must have been another deviation, because again, Johan seems to have a totally different type of relationship with the actual picture book and the characters in the picture book, to the point that, it's essentially him reenacting the plot of the book. I've seen it, now that I know for sure, that's been his trajectory. It's bizarre. It really is, that this long portion of his life has been dedicated to this. And the thing is, this kind of brings me back to that point again, him actually having that panic attack, that episode. Is it possible that he's looking at that and now it's coming back to him? Or maybe, it's not even that it's coming back to him. Maybe he's understanding, whoa, hold on. Everything I've done up until this point, it's been this. It's in this book, my whole identity, my whole trajectory, everything I've done for years, it's laid out right in front of me in this picture book, right? And the idea of that just completely messed his mind up at that point. So if I try to put myself in Johan's shoes at that point, if he's beginning to understand, oh, everything I've done up until this point has no meaning. I didn't actually even make those choices myself, right? Even though he must have felt like he is making those choices himself. Ultimately, everything's just from the book. He's followed it step by step, again, reenacting everything from the plot of the book, right? So, realizing that, again, that would do a number on anyone. And ultimately that moment back in episode 33 and in the subsequent episodes, it's essentially framed as a turning point, quite a substantial turning point, to the point that, in the follow-up episodes, you see clearly that Johan seems to have changed his plans, right? The things he's interested in. He dropped his interest in Schubert, right? As he tells the late Red Hindenburg, right before she's executed. And then he tells her about this darkness that's even greater than the darkness he's experienced before, right? And again, I believe, and I speculated that, this is something that that kind of came about once he had that experience with the picture book in the library, right? And it's kind of helped him, remember things, take him back to, again, from the sounds of things, a really dark time as a youngster, right, as a young child. But, as far as his potential new trajectory is concerned, Johan's new trajectory, that is, this idea of this great fire, and, that right there, it's not the biggest shocker, is it? They've actually alluded to this, there's been foreshadowing, there's been setup for something like this, that it's a prophecy and all of that, right? Those students spoke of it at that club. And I think a couple of episodes ago, I brought it up again, a couple of times actually recently. So that's not the biggest shocker, right? But, this idea of everyone being trapped in there. And, I actually even questioned, okay, how the hell does Johan get out of here? Because he's also trapped in here with all of these people, because of course he's not about to just die here. He's not choosing to die here, but that being said, maybe that's how he wants to frame it. There's certainly a strong possibility that he does want to just, make it seem like, okay, the person who goes by the name of Johan, right? Schubert's assistant, right-hand man and all of that, he also perished in that great fire at the library, right? And then from that point on, once again, he becomes this nameless figure. And if indeed he is trying to pull that off, he effectively becomes a ghost, right? And beyond that, there's also this notion of once again getting rid of everyone that actually knew about Johann. But again, that being said, there's still too many people that know about him that are not even inside of this building at the moment. And even the ones that are inside, people like Roberto, people like that lady. The lady I could see maybe being crazy enough to just die in there, But listen, there's a lot of planning that goes into this or has gone into this. So maybe they have their own exit routes prepared, right? But yeah, even the people that are in there, Tenma's definitely not going to die. Even Roberto, I don't think is going to die in there. And then again, on the outside, you've got people like, Nina, Lotte, Reichwein, and kind of you've got Lunge, But again, Lunge is a bit of a different case. So let's put him to a different, category as far as Johann is concerned. But yeah, there is this possibility of him potentially being able to fake his death and get out of there. And then, of course, go focus on this new trajectory of his now that he's kind of given up on Schubert. Though, again, that being said, he's certainly making sure that Schubert understands. He wants Schubert to see this. He wants him to experience the fear, the chaos. And you see that it actually hits Schubert. And it's by design as well, because Johann deliberately begins to describe, they came from far and wide to see you, right? It's a full house. And at that point, Schubert begins to truly understand the things that Johann is about to put into motion, right? And, Schubert tried. He tries to remain calm, and he tries to make sure that they remain calm. But, it's like I said, the chaos is inevitable, right? Especially once you introduce that inferno into the equation, essentially. And before I move on from this, there's also setup, right? Episodes go at this point. Episode 33, actually. He tells all of these orphans, these children that, he'll be dying soon, and, it'll be by the hands of this Japanese man. So, there's already setup. Johann has kind of put things into motion in terms of, this potential fake death. But yeah, let's kind of move on to some of the other stuff. I've got to say, it's a great execution, brilliant even, of a nested story, right? A story within a story, literary device. And I think, ultimately it's intrinsically linked to the thematic core of Monster as well, right? This nested narrative has been implemented, for some time now, like I said a little bit earlier, right? It always held some significance. The endings themselves and the story that's being told through those endings and the journey of these monsters, the two monsters that separate, right? To cover a bit more ground. It's always been important, but then again, all of that escalated quite a bit in episode 33. And now, after actually experiencing this episode, it's like, like I said, the book itself is intrinsically linked to Johann's identity. But yeah, even before this episode and the actual revelation of the book being even more significant, the story of the book itself being even more significant than, expected earlier, it's always been there. It's always been this lingering idea, right? And subsequently, us, the audience, begins to look for meaning, for context, for answers, for symbolism, right? And the book certainly adds a layer of mysticism and folklore as well, doesn't it? It always had that really eerie and intriguing pull to it, right from the beginning. But yeah, now that all of it kind of came together nicely in this official capacity, right? By the story itself, within the context of the narrative at hand, it's just this really satisfying feeling. It really is. Because look at it from this perspective. If you take away everything about the book and, how Johann has kind of followed it step by step, like I said, kind of like a Bible, a guidebook. If you take all of that away, what exactly does Johann have to show for it, for his life up until this point? I think that right there, that understanding, I feel like that right there, him possibly kind of trying to tackle that idea as he came across that book in episode 33. And again, all those, I suppose, memories and all of that stuff that's been suppressed, just rushing back to him, I think that could have played a part. That could have been a major factor in that episode of his, right? That potentially without this, there's nothing else to me or to my life, to my identity. to the things I've, put into motion and all of that. I feel like everything he's put into motion, more or less, has been shaped by the narrative or the plot of this picture book, right? Or it certainly shaped it in quite a significant capacity. And, essentially he kind of became the embodiment of this nameless monster, right? At some point in time, again, in those formative years, he got a hold of this book, or he was given this book, or he came across this book at a time of need, perhaps, right? And he kind of latched onto everything about the book, and he related perhaps with this nameless monster. He related with the prince, Prince Johann, to the point that he ultimately, again, he took that name. Now let's shift the focus to Nina and her relationship with this book, the picture book, A Nameless Monster. I mean, a really interesting thing happened there, right? She ends up, essentially just reading the book normally. She's translating it and all of that because it comes to her quite naturally, right? But then, as Lotte asked her, "Oh, are you Czech? You're able to read the book. You're able to translate." It's a surprise to Nina as well. It's almost kind of like, not muscle memory, maybe you can call it muscle memory, but not quite. Same type of function, right? It came naturally to her, like I said. So, she's a little bit baffled by that as well. She's like, "Oh yeah, I guess I did just read that book." And then she said, "I'm not sure." So yeah, it's a bit hazy for her as well. That that part of her past, of their past, right? Her and Johann. But she did say that she remembers someone reading that book to her. Now, of course, immediately the mind kind of goes to Johann, right? But again, 37 episodes, there's still quite a bit that's unknown about that part of their lives. There could be a handful of new characters that I get to meet or learn about, at least, right, in the second half of the series. So if it doesn't end up being Johann that read the book to her, you just kind of have to ask the natural question. The next natural question, I suppose, it's about their parents. And if not by any biological parents, what about guardians and other adults in their lives at that point of their lives? But yeah, if you look at Nina, she does appear to have a firm hold on who she is now. I mean, kind of, right? Or who she wants to be, at least, right? Despite not knowing or remembering her own origins. Right? So either their upbringing diverges at some point, as I kind of alluded to and speculated about. And again, I'm speaking of before they got to the German border. So yeah, Johann kind of alludes to this, doesn't he? Now that he remembers, I suppose, since that incident, the library incident and all of that, remembering a further darkness at that. Yeah, it just kind of brings up this notion of, okay, man, this kid, since birth, I suppose, since really early days, he's always had a tough time. He's always gone through it. He's been put through it. And yeah, I mean, the one thing that's been clear is that he used to be like this before even Kinderheim 511, right? And I spoke of this a couple of episodes ago again. So yeah, his upbringing back in Czechoslovakia, it did a number on him, even before any of the stuff that played out in Germany for him. Her struggles are a bit different than Johann's, right? Everyone's got their own unique struggle, of course. I'm not diminishing Nina's struggles, but, it really kind of appears that Johann has gone through a totally different type of thing, I suppose, to the point that this child found himself in a position that he latched onto, this picture book and the characters of this picture book, the plot, the story of the picture book, and the idea of not having a name, not having this identity and all of that, right? The sense of self-worth. So he also kind of acted in the same manner even back then, or he related quite a bit to the nameless monster. But, going back to Lotte and her, role in all of this, and her really pressing Nina at that moment, listen, initially I felt that, okay, she's kind of crossing lines here. But, ultimately she does kind of understand that she got a little bit too excited. Perhaps she does end up crossing a few lines. But listen, realistically speaking, yeah, listen, a person's telling you that they actually don't know themselves, right? So from Lotte's perspective, yeah, I can see how that feels just really bizarre and just frustrating, right? She's like, oh, give me a straight answer, right? Are you really Nina Fortner? And, at that point, Anna, whoever that is, essentially doesn't actually know. She's not able to actually give her an answer to that. And again, from Lote's perspective, it's just baffling. How could you not know yourself? It's you we're talking about here. She said that exactly, right? So yeah, from that angle, I understand. It can be rather baffling and frustrating as well. And perplexing. How can this person not know themselves? But again, Lotte doesn't know their story, everything they've been through. They themselves don't even have a complete understanding of it, their origins and all of that. So, how the hell are they going to explain it to Lotte? So yeah, perhaps it kind of makes sense that she ends up lashing out in that capacity. I got really defensive on Nina's behalf at that point, right? But again, a part of me still believes she does kind of overstep a bit, and she understands it too. She realizes it, right? She said, I got a little too excited there. But, like I said, she is rather clever. She put it all together, essentially, right? That all of this is connected, and, it's connected to Johan, and, this book, the book itself kind of exudes a type of energy, doesn't it? It's almost kind of like personified. And, Lotte even kind of comments on that, that it gives her this really creepy feeling. Now, listen, I'll only speak for myself here. Because I could totally see how many others could find that creepy, just the tone of the book, and just the plot of the book itself. I didn't really find it creepy per se. I just kind of looked at it as just folklore. It's meant to be a children's book. So I don't know. I kind of looked at, the monster, and like I said, I pity the monster. I do. The whole thing is about this journey of self-discovery and, finding an identity, finding a name for yourself. Again, intrinsically linked and all of that, finding a path in life, finding an identity that you are content with. But ultimately, the monster itself has certain tendencies, right? It's in its nature. It cannot suppress its nature. And, the thing is, it's kind of frustrating for the monster as well. But again, this idea of making these deals with, the locals or anyone he comes across, or it comes across, again, this notion of the deal with the devil, I'll give you power for your name in exchange for your name. But ultimately, he's just kind of renting it for a time. And Otto the blacksmith essentially tells a monster as much, that you can't just give away your name, right? And again, I include everything else, within that name, identity, self-worth, and all of that. You simply cannot just adopt someone else's lived experience, right? The monster certainly tries, and fails on many occasions, ends up, consuming them from the inside out. And again, I've actually, discussed this and analyzed that aspect of it. Johan, that is, kind of getting at people. And again, you go back to that example of Richard, consuming him from the inside and all of that. I think I spoke of this a few episodes ago. And, this whole idea of isolating people to the point that, anyone who actually knew that person, anyone that actually knew that person's name and their identity and who they are, ultimately, they just don't exist anymore. The prime example being the wolf, right? That's really early on in the series as well. How Johan actually functions, how he kind of goes to work on these people, right? Ultimately, the wolf is this isolated, sad figure. No one he knows is around anymore, right? And, this name of the wolf, right? This imposing name, perhaps once upon a time, it just means nothing, right? There's no one else around that knew the wolf, as that imposing figure, once upon a time at least. But yeah, even within the story of A Nameless Monster, the picture book, you see how power can corrupt. The notion of power, the promise of power, right? And having that, even if it is for a moment in time at least, again, they don't know that they'll be consumed by the monster, that it's only going to be temporary. But none of those things matter, man. They make, all of them make the deal. And you see that Johan has certainly pulled that off in real life as well. He's facilitated a lot of these similar story beats, if you will, in real life as well. And the thing is, he knows, he's, like I said earlier, he's got a knack for attracting and kind of pinpointing a really specific type of person. But another really interesting component of Nameless Monster, the story of the picture book itself, is this idea of the monster trying to learn to fake their humanity, right? Essentially kind of like a fake it till you make it approach. I mean, it certainly gives it a shot, doesn't it? It tries on many different humans. But here, a really specific thing comes to mind. Once again, I think I've brought it up before, Dexter, right? Dexter has a dual nature, right? The dark passenger. And then, again, the normal life. Again, for a long time, actually, he is someone who had to imitate and fake emotions, right? Again, fake their humanity, fake it till you make it, all of that. But ultimately, even someone like Dexter, he learns to actually feel some of these really normal human emotions. So, ultimately, there's this idea that, the monster and the prince both embody two parts of Johan's identity, right? His dual nature and all that. Johan also seems to have his own dark passenger. And also just, a little bit off topic, Dexter is one of those shows I kind of grew up on. But yeah, like I said, during the reaction portion, the whole presentation is so impressive. Just the look of it, the art style, the picture book actually being brought to life really quite effectively, I'd say. They take a really clever approach with the frame rate. And again, the narration just ties it all together nicely as well, right? It really truly felt like a transportive experience, didn't it? And listen, I think it actually does kind of put us in young Johan's shoes as well. Back around the time he must have come across the book. Again, it remains to be seen how exactly and why exactly that book meant so much. And also, as far as the endings are concerned, is that the complete book? Did Nina just essentially read the whole book for us? I mean, it's a picture book. Picture books aren't meant to be that long. So yeah, there's a possibility that actually is the complete story, right? It's not much of a happy ending or anything, if that is, the conclusion of the story. I mean, at the end of the day, it is meant to be a children's book, right? So maybe it does continue. Maybe, throughout the next phase, the next 37 episodes, I might see a continuation of it, beyond that point of, that the young prince Johann being isolated because everyone that knew the name is now gone. But yeah, once again, if you take a step back and look at it, it really must have been quite a shock to find out that, his entire existence up until this point is essentially just this reenactment, right, of this picture book. And again, in prior episodes, I've already kind of discussed, him, becoming a part of these families, and then of course how he handled Richard, and again how he handles all these other people, right? How he compels them, or how he compels the monster within them to consume them from the inside out. And, once again, kind of going back to that scene of the Red Hindenburg, Johann leaving the Red Hindenburg and saying something like, I'm a non-existent person, yeah, after this revelation that even the name itself is borrowed from that book, from the prince in the book, it's just, it appears to be even more of a blank slate than before, as far as the figure that goes by the name of Johann is concerned. But yeah, after experiencing episode 37, now one of the most important questions of the entire story is, why exactly did that child latch onto that book or the characters or the plot of that book, again, to the point that it became his identity, right? The trajectory of his life from that point on. What kind of position did this child find himself in, right? And again, I do believe that perhaps even back then, both Nina and Johann's upbringing might have deviated a tad bit, given how things have played out for Johann, right? So yeah, there's a lot of compelling stuff ahead of me. I can just kind of tell because I have a lot of questions that come out of this episode. But, to end it off, I want to focus on, again, the final moments of the episode, I suppose. Roberto and Dr. Tenma, as this climactic face-off begins to take place. And, Dr. Tenma keeps telling himself, I have to shoot. I have to shoot. And again, if you go to the beginning of the episode, he's trying to do the same thing, right? He goes through all the things that led to this moment, all the people that ended up losing their lives because he made that choice to save Johann on that night. But ultimately, that's another talking point there, isn't it? Him feeling that amount of tremendous guilt for saving a young boy's life because of the person the boy is or ends up becoming or is capable of, the things the things he's capable of, rather, right? At the time, he did the right thing as a doctor. He did the thing that he believed in most. He had no idea this is the type of person this child could end up becoming, right? That's just, I don't know. And I think episodes ago, a long time ago, before the year-long break, I speculated about the possibility of, okay, him kind of getting to do it all over again, right? Or being in the same, I don't know, being in the same position once again, right? Older Johan this time. Could he actually let Johan die, knowing that he could actually save Johan, right? That I always felt that that's an exciting possibility, right? It's the type of thing you really feel like they could explore again. You see that Roberto is so sure that Dr. Tenma is not going to be able to shoot him or kill him. He tells him that you're just a doctor, right? He downplays it. He looks down on it, in that really specific situation, right? He tells him that you're not going to be able to kill anyone. You can't do that. You can only give people life, right? Think about that. You can only give people life. Again, he diminishes it. He looks down on it in this unique situation. I don't know. You see that he kind of frames it as a deficit. It's just insane, isn't it? Just the notion of someone saying, you're just a doctor. You can only give people life, and that kind of gives you a bit more insight into Roberto, the type of person he is. And ultimately, you see that he's rather sure of himself as a hitman, as someone who facilitates death, someone who is rather capable of taking life, right? On a professional level. It's child's play to him. It's nothing to him to take a life. The value of life doesn't quite have the same meaning for him. So in this really unique case, you see someone like Roberto actually sees himself as the superior in the situation. I'm the proficient killer, right? I'm the one who can make these things happen. You're just a doctor. You can only give people life. I just thought that's so crazy, isn't it? For someone to frame it in that capacity, you can only give people life. He's a character, isn't he? Roberto. Johan knows how to get to them. He knows how to bring them in, right? Just how to make them tick, and keep and string them along enough, essentially. Right? Johan didn't feel the need to tell Roberto about the change of heart or the change of plans, though ultimately Roberto just understood anyways, right? He starts laughing and great, acting on display as well. You don't really get to hear Roberto have that fit of laughter. But yeah, I think I'll end it off on that note. It's rather fitting, I suppose, the cliffhanger. But yeah, it's a phenomenal episode. Certainly a contender for the best episode of the series up until this point. But again, there's a few other contenders as well. I can't just say it's a clear-cut best episode of the series, but it's right up there. One of the best for sure. But yeah, if you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. If you are interested in early access or timer-based full length or full opacity, consider checking out the Patreon page and, possibly supporting the channel as well. In the process of it all, the links are in the description and the pinned comment, also links to social media. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. It really is. And I do hope to see you again soon for episode 38. Until then, take it easy.